Okay, let's just cut right to it. A massive clash between the president and the Supreme Court has just completely redrawn the map of global trade. We're talking billions of dollars, a huge constitutional showdown, and this whole story is moving at lightning speed. So let's dive in.
All right, buckle up. On February 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court dropped an absolute bombshell. It completely upended one of the administration's biggest economic weapons. I mean, the core of its whole protectionist agenda was on the chopping block. And believe me, the court did not hold back.
You know, sometimes it all comes down to just a few words. And in this case, it was this one sentence from Chief Justice Roberts that brought the whole thing crashing down. He wrote for the majority and just dismantled the entire legal foundation of the president's tariff strategy. The court's argument? That the administration stretched a law way, way beyond what it was ever meant to do. The verdict was crystal clear, and the fallout, well, it was immediate.
Boom! Unauthorized. In a decisive 6-3 ruling, the court flat out said the president's use of this key Emergency Powers Act to slap on tariffs? Nope, not authorized by law.
And the next domino to fall? Invalidated. What does that mean? It means billions, with a B, of dollars in tariffs that had already been collected were suddenly legally void, gone.
And just like that, struck down the entire legal justification for this massive, sweeping tariff campaign, officially gone.
So, how did we even get here? To really get what the court decided, we have to look at the specific law at the very heart of this fight, and, how it was used to totally reshape American trade policy. Okay, so this is the law in question, IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's been around since 1977, and basically it gives the president some really sweeping powers when there's a national emergency. The administration's lawyers kind of zeroed in on this phrase, the power to regulate importation, and they argued, hey, that's broad enough to let us impose tariffs. And man, did things move fast. Check this out. In early 2025, the president triggers IEEPA. Then, over just the next couple of months, you see a whole series of executive orders just rolling out, one after another, imposing tariffs as high as 125%. It was a total trade shockwave, and it all led right up to the Supreme Court's big decision just a year later.
So what was the court's logic here? Well, it was actually pretty simple. They looked at the law, IEEPA, and said, hey, we don't see the words tariff or duty anywhere in here. Basically, the power to regulate something can't just be stretched to mean you have the power to tax it. Those are two very different things.
Okay, so with the president's go-to trade weapons suddenly off the table, the entire global negotiating game board just got flipped over. Seriously, let's take India as a perfect example. They were this close to signing a massive trade deal, and then this ruling came down and changed literally everything overnight. I'm not kidding, an Indian delegation was literally packing their bags for Washington to get this deal finalized when the news broke. And they just hit the brakes. Hard. Put everything on pause. Now, the word out of New Delhi is that they're evaluating all aspects of this ruling before they even think about coming back to the negotiating table. So let's look at the before and after, because this is where it gets really interesting. Before the ruling, India had agreed to this 18% deal rate just to avoid those even higher IEEPA tariffs. But after the ruling, well, those IEEPA tariffs are gone. So the U.S. slaps on a new, lower 15% global surcharge, but it's under a totally different law. And this is the question everyone in New Delhi is asking right now. Why on earth would they pay that higher 18% deal rate for something the U.S. literally can't legally enforce anymore? The big threat that got them to the table in the first place? Poof, it's vanished. And that gives them a much, much stronger hand in all of this.
But if you think this story ends there, you'd be wrong. The administration didn't just pack up and go home. Nope, they pivoted immediately and sent a very clear signal that this whole tariff fight was far from over.
And I mean the response was immediate. We're talking the same day the Supreme Court ruling came down, the ink wasn't even dry, and the president was already announcing a brand new global tariff, this time citing a completely different and much older law.
So the administration is really digging deep into the legal attic for this one. They pulled out Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. I mean, this is a pretty obscure rule that no president has ever used before, but there's a catch, a big one. These new tariffs, they can only last for 150 days unless Congress signs off on them. And we're already hearing whispers that another law, Section 301, might be the next tool they pull out of the box.
Okay, so this all boils down to two huge unresolved questions. One is about money, and the other is about power.
$200 billion. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the high-end estimate of how much money was collected from importers all over the world under these IEEPA tariffs. And remember, these are the tariffs the Supreme Court just said were not legally authorized.
So you're probably wondering, what happens to all that cash? Well, getting it back is not going to be easy. As one expert put it, it's going to be a company-by-company slog through the court system. See, the money wasn't paid by the foreign company that made the stuff. It was paid by the importer of record. That's the U.S.-based company that actually brought the goods into the country. So getting any kind of refund is going to depend on thousands of individual lawsuits and contracts. It's going to be messy.
And you know, this is about so much more than just trade deals and tariffs. This ruling is a massive, landmark statement on the separation of powers in the U.S. The Supreme Court basically drew a bright red line in the sand and said, look, the power to tax and regulate commerce, that belongs to Congress, not the White House.
Which really leaves us with this one final, crucial question. The Supreme Court has made its stance clear. But as the administration keeps looking for new legal pathways to impose tariffs, this fundamental battle over executive power and the entire future of American trade policy, well, it seems like it's really just getting started. What happens next is anyone's guess.